back to the Business Simple podcast. It's your host, James, and we are back with the My Thoughts series. In front of me, I have a number of topics that I'm going to be talking about, and this one here is one that I'm really excited for. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is what working with a business coach has actually done for me. Now, I have had always a passion for bringing consultants in, bringing coaches in, bringing advice in. And so what I'll do in this episode is I'll talk through some of the different things that I've done, some of the positives from those things, some of the negatives from those things. And if you're looking to get some advice for your business, I'll be able to give you a little bit of a, this is what's worked for me and this hasn't worked for me, or these are the things that I would ensure that I get from a coach or a consultant or an advisor or even a board member, which is probably where I'll finish up in this episode. So I'll take you a little bit through my journey with business coaching. I believe it was 2021, maybe 2020, either of those 2 years, I had 2 consultants. So what I essentially realized that I needed at that point in time, my team was pretty small, but it was getting bigger. I might have had 10 people or something like that around that time. What I realized I needed to become a better leader, and I needed to become, I needed a little bit of accountability, and I also needed to become a little bit wiser financially because let's be real, it was 2023. So I wasn't very old at the time, maybe 24, 25. I was dealing with a company that was turning over 7 figures a year, as any 23 or 24-year-old or however old I was at that point would have done. I didn't really know anything about tax. I sort of was just like, man, that new M3 looks pretty cool. And I was just sort of going around doing whatever I wanted to do by feel, and I didn't really have a hands-on financial advisor. So I spent a lot of money over that year on consulting. It probably would have been circa $40,000 in that 12-month period, maybe even more. I had an accounting company come in as an advisor, the 2 directors, and we did quarterly catch-ups. We went through financials, we did things like that. And I met every week or every fortnight with another business coach. Now, through that period, I do not believe that I got a very good return on the money that I spent. I think that through the business consultant, I got some good accountability. I did, however, send him through my financials every month, and I never really got any advice around anything I was doing wrong there. Turns out at the time I was doing a whole bunch wrong, and so there was a little bit of a misstep where no one's going to really care about your money the way that you will care about it, but there's probably varied levels to consultants. I spent a lot of money on that consultant. I think it was, at the peak, I was spending $4,000 a month, and I had him doing some work with my leadership team as well. Early days, I got some really good gains. So over the first 3 months, I learned some cool things about systems and processes. I learned a lot off them. I learned about some key areas that I was deficient, and I was able to roll that out. But then it just got a little bit repetitive over time. So that's probably one thing that I would say about bringing a coach into your organization is if it feels flat, you either need to ask them to make it not feel flat, or you need to find another advisor. Often all you need is that conversation. Hey, it feels like we're kind of going over the same thing every time, and I don't need to spend X dollars a month on just being able to talk about my feelings. And instead, I want, activity from you, and I want value from the money I'm investing. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask for. The financial advice that I got was stop buying cars, which they were probably right about, especially at that time. That turned out to be the right advice, and I did downsize vehicles while going through that process with them and freed up some cash, which was the right thing to do. They, once again, we talked sort of loosely about tax, but I didn't really think that for the $15,000 per year that I was receiving, that they were really on it enough. I would have loved to have heard, hey, this is where you're at every couple of weeks. I would have loved to have some sort of more in-depth conversations with them around how that stuff works. And by the end of it, I realized kind of after a year of going through that process that I didn't actually even really understand how tax worked even by that point. So at that point, I decided to cease that consulting too. I then went through probably a year of doing nothing from a consulting perspective. And I don't believe that's right either. I think having some stuff in place is worthwhile doing. Now I have an arrangement with a business coach where I was one of his early clients. It's really affordable. It is probably more of an accountability thing than anything. I think I see him once per month. He adds some value. He has quite a good network and he's a nice guy and it's good to catch up with him. It's not overly expensive. I then do like impact training on stuff. So I've recently just gone through NeuroFit with Rico Gomez is a really good example of this and have made massive gains on my mindset, the way that I understand, the way that I think, how I handle testing situations, how I embrace pressure, all that sort of stuff over 8 weeks. I spent a reasonable amount of money on it, and this is sort of where I'm getting to with this overall chat, is I think that everyone would benefit from picking out their weak points, like having a really good look in the mirror, picking out their weak points, and then going and getting a consultant for 3 months for that impact piece around your weakness. Where I find it can fall a little bit short is the recurring thing. People can get a little bit complacent and a bit lazy, and you really want your consultant to be coming to your meeting with like, here's this idea I've got for you. Here's this way you can make your business better. Here's this thing I've thought about. You want that above the line value add. You don't want to be going in there and, just repeating the same process each time you meet with them. What I've also done that I'm investing quite heavily in this year is I've created an advisory board that currently has 2 members. It's getting a third, and they are people that are deeply experienced. So a lot of them have both of them have built and exited out of businesses. They're both older. They'd be in their 50s, and they're energetic. They love young, up-and-coming business. They want to be a part of our journey, and they both sit on a few boards and they're involved in a few different things. So we pay them to sit on our board, one of which is my accountant, and the other one is a really close connection of mine and someone that I trust deeply. I may look to expand that board to 3 people at some point in time. I've considered it just to bring a bit of a polarizing point of view in and just to challenge myself a little bit more. But that is something that I've received an extremely high level of value from. That you do have to understand within a board like that, you see them sort of every couple of months and they're like, go do this. And then they sort of expect 2 months later for you to have completed it. They're not the kinds of people that hold your hand through it, but I probably prefer that over the super regular catch-ups because I can make really big impacts in that period of time. This board is also available in the Gap. So I had a problem the other day and I was like, I need to get in front of these guys. And so Tia was able to set up a conversation with them inside of a couple of weeks where we did sort of an afternoon and we just went over everything. And they were extremely helpful for that. And they're also, they've been there before, which is probably the final thing that I was going to get to with experience when it comes to business consulting is it is one thing to learn about running a business and to read about running a business and to watch videos on running a business and to read books on running a business and to do courses on running a business. That is one thing. Doing it is an entirely other one. And I don't believe off the back of this, the various things I've done, the money I've spent on this coaching, and which, by the way, what I've spoken about today would probably only be scratching the surface, but I don't believe that you can get the level of insight that you need from someone who hasn't been there. I don't think that unless you understand what it's like to borrow money to make a payroll or to have $100,000 worth of outstanding invoices or to have a staff member cost you $100,000 because they do something wrong, or I don't believe unless you've really felt that, you understand it. And because of that, I think that when you're looking for consultants or people to grow your business, you need to make sure that those people have been there before. And I now have a bit of a policy around that I follow pretty closely. It's been hugely beneficial for me. And there are the opportunity around that impact stuff. I'd like to do some leadership development and some financial skills development over the next 12 months. And I will likely bring people in for short periods of time to do that. But I will have the foundation of my advisory board and the business coach that I work with at the moment that's good at what he does. And I will just do the other things as like impact skill learning activities, the same way as I went through with NeuroFit. So that's my thoughts on business consulting. I've spent a lot of money on it over the years and I've definitely had some things that have been hugely successful and some exercises have been hugely successful and some that have been a bit of a waste of money. So hopefully you don't have to go through the same process when it comes to wasting the money. You can just benefit from the things that have been good that I've talked about in this episode. So that's me on my thoughts around business coaching and what it's done for me. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it's saved you from making some errors, and I will catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, check us out on socials, follow us on Spotify, have a look at YouTube, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.